how do we go from you having always, I think, had the position, not interested in franchise filmmaking? There had apparently been other people who, logically enough, approached you to do that, and the answer was no. What changed with, because of Captain Kennedy or Star Wars or whatever? And what was the outreach that takes from the outreach through getting to a yes?
I mean, the yes came because it's Star Wars, man. Star Wars. Yeah, Star Wars was similar to religion in my life. Star Wars was something like a lot of us. It's boring even to say for a dude my age to even say this. It's very boring, but Star Wars was what I think for a lot of people it was, which was so deeply ingrained in my life and something I cared so deeply about. And I think it's even less than the movies, like when you're a kid. I think it's the toys, because the movies, when I was a kid, that we didn't have, you actually have to, I mean, you guys remember this, you had to kind of, at your local video store, put your name on a list, and there was like a 3-month waiting list to even get the tape of Star Wars, and then when you got it, you would watch it 1,000 times. And so you didn't see the movies that often, but the first storytelling that you're doing as a kid is using those toys as props, and so your imagination is literally existing in the reality of these movies. So anyway, so it meant just so much to me. It was the one thing, and there's no way I could have said no.
And just to remind folks, you're being asked in that moment for just your 4th feature to make the film that would follow J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens, which has in its opening crawl a reference to The Last Jedi, and he was still making The Force Awakens when you came on, right, to do the writing of the follow-up to that, which I think you said was presented to you as, and kind of makes sense that in the new trilogy, this was going to be the Empire Strikes Back of that new trilogy. What did that was not something that was something that was said to you, right? So what did you interpret that to mean as you then set about writing your film here? And what did you interpret that to mean? And also, did you feel in any way, were you given any restrictions about where you could go with it?
Well, no, I wasn't given restrictions. The restrictions though kind of drew themselves because, we had JJ's script, and so that's really what I started from, is reading a script, and then I was watching dailies as he was shooting them, and I was writing very much based off that. So the restriction was, and it's not a restriction, but it was a great just launching point, is just trying to draw forward as dramatically as possible these things that JJ had created that I really loved. And the Empire part of it is important because Kathy said that to me in like one of our first meetings. We're looking for someone to come in and do the Empire of this series. To me, I took that very seriously. To me, Empire, when I was a kid, it is what it is because it doesn't replicate the experience of the first movie. It takes it forward into the next step, and it's very much a second act. And in the second act, it's the movie where the heroes fail and where they're tested and pushed, and they're presented with the hardest thing they can possibly be presented with, in the case of every single one of them. And for me, that as a middle chapter, in order to set up the triumph at the end, is what makes the whole trilogy tick. And so I guess that was, for me, that was kind of the starting point of the whole thing.
Just to remind folks, you introduced several new characters, including Rose, the Kelly Marie Tran character, Vice Admiral Holdo, Laura Dern's character, some porgs, among others. But you also made the decision, which I know as is shown in the documentary that we were just talking about, that people, if you haven't seen this, really need to check out. A documentary that you essentially like commissioned to be made of your experience directing this film, and it's called The Director and the Jedi. And I watched it ahead of this, and I just found it helped me to appreciate what a massive thing you were becoming involved with, but it also showed that, you're stepping into a thing which at that point, 2017 was 40, let me check my math, but I think 40 years after the original Star Wars, and still with Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. Obviously this was sadly the last film that Carrie made, but with Mark, the issue which is captured in your film and which he and you have both spoken about was that he wasn't especially excited that it was going to be the last we would see of Luke, and also just the general outlook of Luke. And I wonder how if you can describe beyond what we see in the documentary, just how you navigated that, because there is no Star Wars without Luke and Mark Hamill, but for the story, it felt like where you needed to go, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess the way, just in terms of my relationship with Mark, the way that I handled it was just by, on a very base level, having all the empathy in the world for what he was feeling with it. And with Carrie also, I mean, these are roles and worlds and groups of people that have defined their lives for 40 years, and then I show up and drop a script in their lap and say, and now this happens, and they don't, and so I absolutely 100%, had tremendous empathy for what they were feeling with it, or what Mark was feeling with that. But at the same time, it was, I felt the reason I was there, my job was to try and be as fearless as Lucas had been with the original trilogy, and that means that I'm telling that story. I'm not maintaining a franchise the way you maintain a McDonald's franchise or something. I'm not trying to kind of just keep the train running and keep perpetuating this thing that we all love. I'm trying to tell the most powerful story I possibly can, and this is a story about Rey and Kylo and Finn and Poe, and it's about, in the context of this story, Luke Skywalker is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of this trilogy, and so and that's kind of what that just made so much sense to me, and I will say Mark was wonderful to work with, and this comes across, I think, in the documentary, but I always say this, is that Mark's a tremendous actor, he's a wonderful human being, and he, for all the things that he felt about that, on day one when we started shooting, he said, this is what you want it to be, I'm going to make it the best it can possibly be, and there was not a single moment of him being anything but a wonderful collaborator through the entire shoot, which for me I can see how that's a superhuman effort for anyone to have done, and so I'll always be grateful to him and admire Mark so deeply as an actor and a person.
Yeah. And you guys made a beautiful movie, and we should say that it was, just thinking back to barely a decade earlier was 12 years earlier was Brick for $450,000, whatever it was. This one, correct me if I'm wrong, I read $300 million.
Where's Rom?
Where's Rom?
Seriously shaking his head somewhere. There you go. Yeah, no. Or are you saying 500? No, it wasn't that. No, you're saying no, it wasn't that much.
Okay, well, even if it's anywhere near that,
it was a lot of money.
A lot of money, a lot of responsibility, and people should know that it had the second biggest domestic opening weekend ever for a film. Became the 9th highest grossing film of all time. It's the kind of thing where I know you hear a lot from the people who love it, and you hear a lot from the people who take issue with things. And I think, just as a final Star Wars related question here, I wondered if, there have been these different discussions that I know you've spoken about, where you were potentially going to do additional Star Wars, maybe a different trilogy or a follow-up to that or whatever. Was any of the feedback, positive, negative, whatever, did any of that in any way connect to your not doing additional Star Wars?
No, not at all. It's in fact, it's the reason that I wanted to, and it's my overall experience in terms of, I'd say my experience with putting the movie out and what you're talking about with fan feedback. I mean, first of all, I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan, and so I know the deal. I know that Star Wars fans are passionate about this stuff, and we love the stuff we love, we hate the stuff that we hate, and we fight about it. And that's been happening since the original trilogy. I was in college when the prequels came out. Are you kidding me? The prequel wars. We had a few. Yeah, I mean, everybody did. It was, and so the notion that Star Wars has been this kind of, Shangri-La united fandom, and that anything could then split that apart. The reality is Star Wars has always been something that has been different things to different people, and I think that's part of the fun and the passion of it is as fans is arguing about it, respectfully, and so yeah, no, it's and the amount of I don't know. I've talked to so many people over the years who have, since we made that movie, who have such deep connections to Star Wars and who have deep connections to that movie. And so it's been the most positive experience I've ever had with anything I've made in terms of interacting with people who have seen it. So no, I came out the other end of it loving Star Wars fandom more than I did